That's why this game has like died off from like millions of players to like 100,000, because the only people who are left are the people who have some sort of attachment to the game's wider community, right? Because I don't know if Capital Games will ever admit that, but without the guilds and the YouTube channels and all the people who like to hang out with each other, the fucking game would have 0 players. Because it's not a great game, right? It's just a vessel for a lot of people to hang out. And that's why this game has lasted a lot longer than other games. Like other games, like, you know, will kind of survive just on the fact that people kind of enjoy it, and then they'll get bored, especially these hero collector games, and then they leave, right? The reason Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes hasn't died completely, I mean, it's substantially worse than, you know, say it used to be doing by unimaginable metrics. But the reason that the core group of people is still here, and the reason the game is so expensive now, is because, you know, people enjoy the community. And that's why everything is so expensive. That's why you have to spend $400 on a marquee character. Because Capital Games didn't really keep up with keeping the game fun, right? So instead, they have fewer players. So that means they have to ask more financially of those few players. Because if there were millions of people like Raid Shadow Legends or Marvel Strike Force, like, they have a lot more players, a lot more content, they can have a smaller, you know, ticket price for a lot of characters. Because, you know, there's more people who are willing to pay that price, and therefore they don't need to ask a couple people to pay $100,000 over the course of a couple years to keep the game up and running. So, I mean, I wish earlier, like before I even started playing the game, they would have realized that, and then I feel like they could have altered course, and, you know, the game would have been in a better space. They kind of dropped the ball, kind of let it die. Is it of any fault of their own? I mean, who's to say if they have, you know, that grasp of, like, what their game is? But, you know, definitely just disappointing for, you know, those of us who enjoy this game, not only because of Star Wars, but because of, you know, the community aspect, that they kind of let it slip off the deep end. So, you know, hopefully they learned from this game, and when they make their Lord of the Rings game, they kind of don't make the same mistake twice of kind of skimping out on content and kind of emphasizing on monetization. Because at the end of the day, that kind of backs them into a really bad corner that no game wants to be in, is that they're so dependent on a few people to stay alive that the game is going to, like, keep moving in a direction that only suits the people that, you know, keep the game alive, right? That's why, you know, actually, I probably, for legal reasons, shouldn't say that. But that's why a lot of what they do is geared towards that end game progression, and that's why they don't want to make a new raid or make a Death Star raid or add things that we've asked for, like a sandbox mode. Because, you know, they have limited time, they have limited resources, and because they didn't do it earlier, they have limited people who are willing to play the game. Which means they have limited people who will spend money, which, you know, puts them on a short leash. Because at the end of the day, you have to realize, like, they have to make money, right? If they have to make money, or they lose their jobs. And we enjoy playing this game, like I've previously stated, because of the community aspect. But if it's all community at this point and no money, we can't play the game because the game dies, right? I should not have done that move right there. So, I mean, ideally, they would have corrected the mistake before it happened, and we would have never gotten here. Which, to a large extent, is why the game has lived so long, is because they didn't make that mistake at first. And the game could, you know, host a big player base, and it was fine, right? But after years of them kind of skimping out on the stuff that makes the game fun, they've backed themselves into a corner that they can't get out of, which is why everything will be more and more expensive. That's why Relic 8 was $100, and Relic 9 was $200, and Relic 10 is going to be $300, and Relic 11 is going to be $400. Because they've put themselves in a place that they can't get out of. I mean, they can get out of it, like, probably pretty easily, right? Make the game more accessible, you know, fix up the tutorial, actually advertise the game, make it less pay to win, and you can kind of recoup a lot of that, because the core mechanics of the game are solid. It's a great IP in Star Wars, so people will play the game, especially if they know that, like, the game is coming back to where it used to be, where, like, content, you don't have to spend money, but if you want GL Vitiate, you can, and he's affordable, and it's not too bad. And then they start, you know, pulling in money from a lot more people, and then they don't have to monetize as much. They can focus more on content because now they're in a position where there's enough players where content actually equals money instead of, the position they are now, which is end game progression equals money. And they can kind of, I don't know, kind of back themselves away from the corner they've pushed, because they're like in this really tight corner right now. So they're fighting for their lives, which is why, like, when the leak happened and people were mad, they're like they don't care about the breach of privacy and trust. Like the guys in there are like friends, you know what I mean? They're all CG friends, so it's not like the end of the world. It's like, I'm sure the guy that did it was like one of the outsiders or something like that. But what they're really scared about is not the breach of trust and the NDA and all that stuff. It's like, if we lose the PR battle to keep the remaining people that we have nothing else and the game shuts down. But if they were in an area where more people played the game, more people were incentivized to spend money on the game because there was content and it was affordable, they wouldn't feel so trapped, It's like a fucking wild animal, right? Like, a lot of animals you can keep as pets, like, theoretically, right? Like, people have tigers and lions and bears, oh my, as pets, right? It's not a good idea. It's actually a terrible idea. But for the purposes of the analogy, play along with me, right? Like, you can go out to one of these Tiger King places and fucking play with a tiger and have fun. But in the wild, if the tiger is fucking starving, it doesn't have food every day from a handler, and its back is against the wall, it's fucking terrified. It's going to do whatever the fuck it takes to stay alive. That's where they are right now. They're at do whatever it takes to stay alive mode because they've let the game slip away. They haven't, put in the work for content and stuff like that. And that's why, like, with this whole leak stuff, like, none of it surprised me, The beta program shutting down, them being pissed, them immediately coming out and being like, well, this isn't exactly how the datacrons are going to work, you know what I mean? Because it's do or die for them, right? They're like, their back's against the wall. This is all they have left because they've kind of let it get to this point. And I don't think it would be entirely too hard for them to get back to the point where they used to be, right? I don't think that that's really an issue. Like, put a couple of advertising dollars, work to actually put content that new players and existing players want to pay, bring down the ticket price to where a marquee character is not going to run you $400, and you're sitting at a place where your back's not against the wall anymore. You have a little bit of room to breathe. Instead of all of your board meetings being about like, fuck, how do we make money? You can think about like, hey, like, what kind of creative things do we want to do this month? Do we want to add a Death Star raid or add a new TB, or do we want to add a new game mode, right? Because years and months where, business is booming, we get territory battles, we get GL. I mean, like, we get new and exciting. Well, I'll take the GL part back. When they're doing bad, we get progression, like GLs, like Relic 8, Relic 9, stuff like that. When they're doing good, we get territory battles, we get raids, because their back's not against the wall, as the analogy goes. So I guess without ever looking, like, you can obviously look at like their metrics and see how much money they make each month and stuff like that, but you don't even have to do that, because if the road ahead is progression, they're doing really bad. If the road ahead is content, they're happy about the place they're in and their back's not against the wall and they're fine, right? So I just kind of want Capital Games to get back to content, and to get there, they have to make the game more appealing for more players. Now, the game I think is appealing. I think if they do like their old marketing strategy, they could bring in a lot of new players. I remember those old EA ads really excited me. I know they have kind of problems with EA as a whole, because EA kind of doesn't like Capital Games. They're kind of like the ugly stepchild that no one really wants to acknowledge exists, right? So they have that kind of adverse relationship with EA as a whole. But I think they're in a position where they could very well kind of get the game back up and running. Now, I don't know if they want to do that because they're focusing so much on the new Lord of the Rings game they're making. I hope that the Lord of the Rings game they're making doesn't kind of fall into the same pitfall. I guess fall into the same pitfall is a little redundant, but I don't know, man. I'm hopeful, I would say. I would say I'm hopeful for the new game, but I mean, they have the blueprint. It's there, you know what I mean? Like, they know what will work. and they know what will not work. I just hope that they have early success, stick to their guns, don't make a lot of the same mistakes, and we can have a long-running Lord of the Rings game alongside a long-running and successful Star Wars game. Because at the end of the day, I would love to play both these games. I would love to play SWGOH and LRHOM every day, because, you know, it's hard to just stream Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes unless you're doing an unlock guide like this, right? Where you just kind of like do the same thing over and over again over the course of a couple hours. So I don't think we need to live in a world where only one of their games is successful. I think we can live in a world where SWGOH and LRHOM. I'm trying to figure out what the proper thing, like, do I call it HOMLR or just we just call it HOM, or do we call it HOMA? I feel like HOMA is probably not the right thing to call it, but yeah, that's kind of my rant. CG is gonna CG. You know, they're not gonna see this video because, I don't know, I feel like I've moved a little bit too far away from their good graces. I feel like I have one advocate at CG, and it's Crumb, and he's on paternity leave, so I feel like my leash with them is kind of run a little dry. Especially now that Doja's gone. Fuck, dude, everyone who likes APGAINS is fucking... They're quitting. Under mysterious circumstances. I'm not saying that CG purposely got Doja Fett a better job to get rid of him so that they didn't have to, you know, have an unceremonious firing because he was being too nice to APGAINS. And I'm not saying... Actually, I definitely can't say that